Welcome to episode 12 of 100 Years of Marine Corps Tankers, a station dedicated to honoring the legacy of Marine tankers and remembering the stories of what made the community special, told through the words of those Marines that towed the line. This next episode is a very special one because I am joined by one of the most senior enlisted tankers currently serving. Master Gunner Sergeant Myron D. Tapio is currently serving as the Instructor for 4th Tank Battalion as the Battalion Operations Chief. Master Guns, thanks for joining me today and welcome to the channel.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk about where your Marine Corps life began. As a native of South Dakota, what inspired you to enlist in the Marine Corps in 1997?
Well, in 1997, I was just finished up my second year of college there at the University of South Dakota. So just still kind of lost in that time, 21 years old, was working for an engineering degree, just kind of still trying to find my way. So decided to join the Marine Corps a little bit just to get some experience or just a little change. We need a little, my wife and I had to have need a little change of scenery. So I decided to join the Marine Corps, try it out, try 4 years, give me a time to finish up my degree and then move on with life. But as you can see, I enjoyed it a lot. Fell in love with the tank community and the Marine Corps. So I'm still here 23 years later.
Absolutely. And we're happy you are, my friend. So you were a West Coast Marine, going through San Diego and MCT out there, and then went to Knox, of course, to attain the MOS of M1A1 tank crewman, and that you completed the course in October 97, and from which you were assigned the MOS of 1812. What images come to mind when you hear of Marine Corps tanker?
Marine Corps tanker, we're all that dusty, dirty, always oily, tired, haven't shaved in a couple of days, hardworking, just always on the move, short attention spans because things are always going on. So, that's what comes to mind. We're always thinking ahead, what's going to happen in the next couple of hours, next couple of kilometers, whatever it is.
I think it's very true and brings out really who we are. Able, like you said, think ahead. Be that critical thinker. Be a positive influence on the battlefield in some capacity or whatnot. And being able to combine those arms in direct and indirect manner. I mean, absolutely, that's a great answer. So 97, you received your first orders to 2nd Tank Battalion, part of 2nd Marine Division, and you were assigned to Bravo Company. And this is kind of where your tour began. While you were there, you were promoted to the rank of sergeant and held several key billets to include M1A1 main battle tank driver, loader, gunner, and then ultimately tank commander, section leader, and platoon sergeant. So you kind of ran the table with 2nd Tanks. Obviously, that's a pretty long period of time. Who were some of the early leaders who shaped you while you were at 2nd Tanks?
Well, checking in back then, this was 1998, prior to OIF and all the other things. So, a platoon was only 7 Marines, and that usually included the platoon commander and the platoon sergeant at that time. So, going to gunnery, you'll be driving one tank. You finish your run, you get back, jump off, you go load on another tank in order just to qualify those four crews with a very short staff platoon. So, my first roommates were Master Sergeant Pitchley and Master Guns Rivera. And at Bravo Company, we had, Chris Willenbecker, Alan East, a lot of young Marines that back then, of course, we're all old now. But, they took me under their wing and I learned a lot from them straight from the beginning. And I still remember my first tank commander being Corporal Amy. I have no idea where he's at now. I haven't had contact with him for over 20 years, but, I still remember him going out to the field, learning a lot, just to pretty much, just that small unit leadership that just, comes from the great people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's something that you took on early and carried with you throughout your career, and for the civilians that are watching that don't know, Master Gunner Sergeant is the pinnacle. It's the highest rank you can attain as an enlisted Marine. And Master Guns certainly earned it from way back when, 97 on. So those leaders shaped you and did a fantastic job as we continue to tell you, talk through your experiences and why, they became so important. August 2001, Sergeant Tapio, you received orders to Fort Knox, where you were M1A1 tank crewman instructor, one of the key people that were responsible for creating and making tankers. And this is kind of where our paths first crossed in February 2003, where you're promoted to the rank of staff sergeant. You had a young PFC Velastic that came through there, and I remember you gave me a pretty good time. It was a good old time back then. What are some of your most memorable experiences at Fort Knox?
You know, I listened to Master Guns Formella's interview, just saying, but just like he said, I think that was probably one of the best tours I had, just because, we checked in August of 2001. Next month was 9/11, so a lot of things happened throughout those 4 years that we were there. We just happened to have a great, awesome group of Marines. Formella, Sigafos, Duvall, Willenbecker, Jules. The list goes on and on. Just the amount of people that were there that were able to come together and just put through a lot of Marines, including yourself and a lot of the other Marines that came through and our, gunnies and master sergeants and staff sergeants at this time. So it was just great. What makes a good duty station is the people, and that was definitely probably one of the best groups of people I've ever had. We always knew what each other was thinking. We all had the same work mentality, and we all had the same thought process when it came to what a tanker should be. So it made life a lot easier, instructing those young Marines and trying to make the best that we could in a short time period we had.
Yeah, I mean, even as a student, even as a student when I was going through, I didn't know very much, obviously, but just the professionalism and just seeing you all work, at the top of your games, every single one of you, especially you. I mean, you just exemplify professionalism. So from a very early on stage, those Marines that were under your charge got to see what right looked like. And when the list you just gave, when you look at those individuals, I mean, all of them went on to very, very successful careers, either in the Marine Corps or out. I mean, they're all true professionals till today. And you're right, that was a very, very special group of individuals that just fed off each other. And whether it was at the schoolhouse or whether it was in combat, whether it was out in the battalions, I mean, you guys really you paved the way and set the standard by which all professionals are kind of measured from that point on. So hats off to you, and thank you for everything you've done for me personally and professionally, and also for all the Marines that kind of came under you. So absolutely. 2005, you, Staff Sergeant Tapio, you received orders to 1st Tank Battalion, 1st Marine Division, where you were then assigned to Bravo Company as a section leader. And then in 2005, you took the company and deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, OIF, and then returned in 2006, where you ultimately transferred to Delta, and then went back out with them in support of a deployment with the 13th MU to Operation Iraqi Resolve in May of 2007. What are some of the early memories, or what's some of the memories that you have from these deployments?
Well, like I said, we checked in to Knox in August 2001. So where that thing was kicking off, we were all at the schoolhouse at that time. So when I got orders of first tanks, and I remember Chris Willenbecker giving me a call and said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" It's like, "Well, I want to deploy." Being a staff sergeant, being in for 6 years at that time, you had to deploy. All the students that we had taught at that time, they were on their first or second deployments by then. So, I just wanted to get out there and deploy and lead Marines and do what I had to do to try to get out to Iraq. So he talked to the ops chief at that time, got me pulled into Bravo Company. So I got pulled into Bravo Company, 3rd Platoon, and we were it was a platoon that was already set up. I mean, pretty much, everybody was on their second deployment. I was probably the only one that was on my first, except for a couple of the other new joins. But learning from them, learning from the NCOs, learning from those Lance Corporals. The tide had kind of turned a little bit. I was the instructor for the past 4 years, but now I was learning from their experiences of what real combat was like and what their OIF 1 and 2 experiences were to help me to do the best I could to try to lead them into harm's way and make sure I brought them back.
That's a great point. I mean, that really brings out, the servant leader and what made you a special leader, and even till today, you were humble enough to realize that although by rank you were senior, by experience you weren't, and the ability to kind of take the lessons learned from even those junior Marines that have some things to offer and to gain, you know, that just shows your humbleness, and that shows your ability to learn. And that's a great leadership trait, and something that, you know, this next generation should sure certainly take heed to. You know, yeah, you were by rank senior, but, you know, certainly, took on those experiences and that knowledge from those junior Marines. And, you know, I'm sure you quickly learned and quickly picked up. And in fact, you did, because in 2007, when you were promoted to rank of gunnery sergeant and transferred back to Bravo Company, you deployed in 2008. This time you were not a boot. You were not a young buck. You know, you were certainly that leader that we all came to respect, very much so. And with Bravo Company, served as a platoon sergeant, and then also or master gunner, excuse me. And then Bravo Company, First Tank Battalion was the last tank battalion to serve in Iraq, operating on tanks in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom Resolve. What are some of the leadership principles that helped shape you as the senior leader that you ultimately became and currently are?
Just like I said, learning from every aspect that you can. You have to take in all the information, any learning objectives you can from anybody. It doesn't matter if they're higher ranking, lower ranking, you know, your peers. You got to you got to take all that information and try to imitate or learn or become something that, you know, something that you can own yourself as a leader. All of us have had those great leaders in our lives, some bad also, but we can also learn from them to try to learn what not to do. But yeah, just honestly, just try and take in all that information of being a leader and trying to process it to become something on your own is, I think, is pretty difficult sometimes, just because you don't know if you're doing good or you're not. So getting that feedback from young Marines over the years has helped out a lot to try to guide me to either improve myself or sustain some of the stuff I've learned over the years.
One of the things about you that I think is remarkable was your ability to kind of take those tools, put them in your toolkit, and use them at the appropriate times. I mean, I've seen you on a range as a master gunner, and by, you know, you, in my opinion, are one of the best, if not the best, that I personally work with, just because of your attention to detail and your focus on, you know, kind of how those ranges should run, and professionalism, and your ability to kind of press when you need to press and let off when you need to let off. I mean, that speaks of you as a person, not just a leader, because, you know, a lot of guys, yeah, they can be technical experts, but when they get on the mic, they're really hard pressed, and they're pushing hard on that range. You had that nice, you know, I like to call it a sweet spot. You had that sweet spot where when you needed to press, you pressed. When you needed to kind of let the crews learn, you did. And I think that's probably one of the things that make you so successful, in your current billet as the instructor, you know, operations chief. It takes a certain type of person, a true professional, to be able to take that time that you have with them, maximize it, and make them who they are. And you know, obviously, you know, our time's coming to an end with that. But up until this point, I think you've done a fantastic job with that, and that really speaks well of your character. 2009, Gunnery Sergeant Tapio, you went back out to 2nd Tank Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, assigned to Charlie Company as the company master gunner, and then as a tank leader from 2009 to 2010. While you were there, you also served as a Battalion S3, the Battalion master gunner from 2010 to 2012. Transferred to Delta Company as a platoon sergeant, and then deployed with Delta Company to Afghanistan in 2013, as once again the last Marine tank company to deploy in support of OEF, excuse me, Operation Enduring Freedom. So what was it like, you know, having seen Operation Iraqi Freedom, and now you're taking tanks into OEF, going into Afghanistan? What were some of the nuances and differences that you had to work through?
Well, not even just the difference between Afghanistan and Iraq. Just every deployment seemed to be different. That first one in 05 and 06 was very kinetic. We were up there in Al-Qaim clearing street by street with the infantry. Then that 2007 one was a lot different. We were more in an open terrain, clearing village by village with the infantry then. And then 08 and 09, we were way up north by the Syrian border, just clearing hundreds of kilometers of areas with sometimes no buildings in it at all. So every time you deploy, it's your mission and your thought process has had to be completely different, because everything is not the same. So I kept that in mind. I tried to teach that to the Marines that were going to the company in my platoon that, hey, whatever you did last time, or if you ever deployed before, this is going to be different. It's always different. It doesn't matter if you deployed just last year. Deploying this time, it's going to change. Rules of engagement, the political scene, everything has changed. So kind of went into that one with an open mind. And then, of course, when we got there, I was attached to the GLT, the Georgian liaison teams with the Marines and the Georgian. So that was something completely different I'd never done before. And we were stuck in a little fob called a Red V out there in the middle of Route Red, just in a small town, small village. So definitely different from all my other experiences and all my other deployments as usual.
What interactions did you have with not just your own unit, but the units with whom you were attached, infantry or otherwise? Having gone through those multiple deployments, how did you sell tanks, and how did you sell the capabilities? And it sounds like each one of those deployments you really used a little bit differently. Can you talk about the nuances there?
Yes. So, most of the time when you're working with infantry or even any unit, sometimes they've worked with tanks, sometimes they haven't. In different aspects, they've worked with tanks, they've done this. So trying to teach them what you can bring to the table in that combat environment, no matter what it is always important. Just to try to find new ways to employ yourself or sell yourself to that unit that you're attached to. Say, hey, I could provide this. If it's, support by fire by a tank or 2 tanks or 4 tanks, or hey, even medevacing, since we're an armored platform, that's a possibility. Bringing out ammunition, since we hold a lot of small arms compared to what the infantry is used to in a squad or even a platoon. We have small arms on a tank, chow, water, all kinds of other stuff to help resupply those squads or platoons that are out there that are farther or out of reach of their own resupply connections. So just try and do everything you can to help out to who you're attached to, if it comes to resupply, if it comes to, direct fires, helping out with indirect fires, communications, because sometimes the vehicles they're on just doesn't reach as far as the tank does. We could talk back 20, 30, 40 kilometers sometimes, depending on terrain. Since most of the time they can't.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to provide any support you can to whoever you're attached to is the one thing to try to keep tanks alive out there.
And you mentioned the different terrain and different tactics between the deployments. Internal to your unit, when you were in the city in that first deployment, were you running split section ops, or how were you doing that? And then ultimately, as it changed when you went out to the open terrain, were you deploying as a platoon, or how was that working?
Well, in the first one, even in the city, we were there as a platoon and down to a section, even down to that one tank on that one street, is how we broke it down, clearing through Huseba. And we even had the MU platoon, to my right. That was their 3 tank was my tank that was on the next street over. So yeah, we fought as a platoon section, even like I said, down all the way down to the individual tank on that one road. In that second deployment, we were deployed as a platoon, obviously with the MU, and then we did section ops, we did platoon ops, and then even in that third one, we were down to platoon and section ops again. So Afghanistan, we were deployed as a company, but then the platoons were farmed out to different areas. Second platoon stuck with the headquarters element, and first and third went out to a Red V in Shagazi. So we were even then we were a platoon, but then we broke down into the sections.
Okay, I'm going to take you to September 8th, 2013. Obviously, this day has a lot of impact for you personally, because during that time, Gunnery Sergeant Tapio, you were struck by an IED in support of Operation Linebacker. And then subsequently, you spent the next 4 months in San Antonio recovering in the burn ward at the San Antonio Military Medical Center. And then it didn't stop you, went back out. But let's pause here for a second and talk about that day in particular. What can you kind of paint that picture as to what happened?
Yes. So a couple of weeks prior to that, we were with the Georgians, and we were clearing this area above Leatherneck. They had been getting mortared and rocket fire up there. So during that time period, my lieutenant's tank's turret had caught on fire, by just a oily rag or something underneath that gun tube. It was sitting on top of the hydraulics, and we were able to put that fire out, but it damaged the tank pretty good. So we went back to Leatherneck, and then we were prepping the other tank. And it took a little bit longer than we thought. So instead of leaving a Red V up there without any tanks, my section pushed back up. And by the time my lieutenant and his Alpha section got that other tank ready, they were pushing back up to our pause, and the company had called up, and they were in the middle of Operation Linebacker at the time. So Alpha section went over there to help them out since they needed some more tanks. And on that day, the company commander, which is now Lieutenant Colonel Buffamani, who's actually here at 4 Tanks with me now, needed some more support from the tanks. Second platoon was having some mechanical issues, and tanks were going down, so my section went up to help them out. We pulled up to Shivani. We've topped off with fuel. Went and talked to Master Sergeant Phillips, who was a tank leader. Went into the COC, kind of got a lay down of what was going on, since we weren't a part of Operation Linebacker from the beginning, so we really didn't know anything yet. Driving out to the position that I was told to go to, ran into my lieutenant, stopped to talk to him a little bit. He gave me more of a lowdown of what was going on, the layout, where the tanks were at, where the enemy was at, where the Afghan army was with some of the Marines, where they're at and what their mission was. And I pushed up a little bit more, ran into second platoon's platoon sergeant, and the rest of the company trains kind of set in there. And then going forward a little bit, the headquarters tanks were on top of a hill. The Exos tank had hit a small ID, messed up the track a little bit, so he's a little bit immobile. And, from what I remember, the air officer, Banjo at the time, he had a little drone up, and he saw some people maneuvering onto the headquarters tanks on top of the hill, and they were moving closer. So I called up to the CEO, said, "Hey, do you want my section to come up there and give you a hand? You got some people creeping up on you." And we could see them from the valley where we're at. Like, you literally see the trail that all the Afghans took and all the other trucks took on top of that hill. So my 3 tank went ahead, and he went first, went down into a ditch. And then I followed, and, from what I was told, it was probably a command det, since so many vehicles had gone through there before. So as I was going through, front came up, and the right rear was in the ditch. And that's when the ID went off, and it kind of blew us upward and top of the other side of the ditch. And it hit right underneath the right side. So, blew out the number 6 and number 7 shocks on the right side. Those road wheels and those arm assemblies were gone. The right exhaust door was gone. It happened to hit right underneath the fuel cell. And like I mentioned before, I just topped off with fuel. So that explosion caused everything to catch on fire, and then everything that was in the bustle rack. And then the net that we had set up for a little bit of sniper cover, probably about 30 to 45 minutes prior, the tank was having a little bit of issues with power. So my gunner was crawling out into the turret and onto the back deck to mess with the battery box a little bit. So we stuck that net up for just a little bit of cover since we were down in the valley. And fortunately, when the IED had hit, I kind of got bounced out of the turret and landed on top of the turret face down. And as I was standing up, the net that we had up, I had caught fire because everything else was catching on fire with the fuel. And that pretty much had wrapped around me, and that's how I got burned up pretty good. Rolled off the tank and onto the ground. Driver was out already. And at that time, we're trying to get the gunner and loader out, and we could hear them. And then they eventually jumped out a little bit earlier, a little bit later. And then we pretty much got into the ditch and waited for my 2 tank him flying up and support. My 3 tank was still in front of me, so he was giving us that cover up there. And then eventually the infantry came up there in MRAPs, cleared out a little area for the medevac bird to come in, and then we had to get medevaced out of there.
Wow. After 4 months, I'm sure of pretty tough recovery, you were able to return back to 2nd Tank Battalion in January 2014. Who were some of the key individuals that helped you post your injury?
My family, of course. My wife had come down and she had beat me down to San Antonio actually before I got there. But what really helped me a lot was the Marines. I did not realize how many Marines were in Texas. I still contact with a lot of them, but even before I got there, a lot of them knew I was coming in, and I was visited by Marines from those first 2 deployments that I'd gotten out when we were living in Dallas. Some Marines that were living up in Amarillo area, some that were living right there in San Antonio, Austin. A lot of Marines came down to see me or contacted me in some way or other. I even had Master Guns Formella and Azevedo come down from the schoolhouse to see me personally. So that helped me try to get back on my feet and try to get back into the fight or get back to the unit as best I could. Lieutenant Colonel Lauder, who was the battalion commander at the time, him and the MO helped me convince the doctors to let me go, because at that time they were trying to keep me for up to 6 months to a year. They didn't know how long the recovery would take. They were talking about PCS in my family down in San Antonio, and me becoming the permanent personnel down there or permanent one of the patients down there at Wounded Warrior Battalion in San Antonio. And, I didn't want to sit there and PCS my family and stay away from the unit, just for basically 1 appointment a month is what I was down to, or what I was looking like come January and February. So with the help of Lieutenant Colonel and particularly our MO at the time, she was able to convince the doctors to release me and let me go back up to 2nd Tanks. I would continue my care at the Wounded Warrior Battalion up there, the TBI clinic and all that, as long as I promised to do all those appointments. But I was eventually able to get back up to Lejeune and go back to work, go back to Delta Company.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story, and that's a testament to your willingness to keep staying the fight. Obviously, you were trying to get back even sooner than what they wanted you. So yeah, thank you, and obviously to everybody that took care of you, thank you as well, because getting you back in the fight was definitely what we needed as a unit. 2015, you returned back to Delta Company in January, and then you were transferred to Bravo Company. You were promoted to the rank of Staff Sergeant, and then you served as the tank leader out there. 2017, you got orders, rather unique orders as Master Sergeant to represent the Marine Corps training mission in United Arab Emirates and report to Marine Corps Security Group for Foreign Advisor Training in Port Story, Virginia in May of 2017. And then you eventually reported to Abu Dhabi in UAE as the advisor for the Staff Non-Commissioned Officer in charge of the Presidential Guard Khalifa bin Zayed Brigade. How do you think that your experiences up to this point and everything you kind of gained as a leader of tanks helped shape you for this unique mission?
Working with a lot of other units, working with other services helped me a little bit, but definitely working with a different country and a different culture was something I was not prepared for, honestly. Just working with the Army, Air Force, Navy, we all kind of got used to that over the past, 18, 20 years at that time. But working with a different culture, particularly one of from the Middle East, was a little bit challenging or difficult. Not really difficult, but different, I would say. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, their tank battalion was not in country. They were doing the Yemen at that time. So my role as the tank liaison was kind of minimal. But I was also the staff NCO of the entire of our KBZ team. So I had to interact a lot more with the head shed, with their higher headquarters over there in Dubai. So that was a little bit different and a little bit more challenging to get used to those type of customs. How they do business is a lot different than how we do it. And it was a great time, I think. It was probably one of my better, I wouldn't call it deployment, but, it was one of my overseas ones up was definitely unique and rewarding, I would say, because it definitely gave me a different perspective on how to work with different cultures, different countries. Because not only was the Emiratis were there, but the Brits were down there. We worked with them a little bit, because they were also advisors to the Emiratis and other aspects. But working with the MU that come in with one of the exercises that they'd done down there. So it was definitely fun, definitely challenging, and definitely rewarding living in another country for an entire year.
And after that tour, you came back in August 2018, 2nd Tank Battalion, where you served as the Company S4 Battalion Logistics Chief. Once again, a key billet. I mean, looking back through your career here, it looks like you've hit almost every single key billet you could, to include some things on top of that. And this is where you were promoted to Master Gunner Sergeant in 2019. And then December 19, you reached where you currently are at 4th Tank Battalion, 4th Marine Division as the Instructor Battalion Operations Chief. And this station has a message, and this year, like I've said already, it's a tough year for everybody. And somebody like yourself who, you served in every single battalion. And like I said, you've held every key billet that you could have held at those battalions. I'll ask this kind of a two-part question. First of all, what is your take on the divestment, and how are you kind of doing with this whole process?
So the divestment was pretty much a shock to all of us. Fortunately, I PCS'd out here in February. I was looking forward to come out here to Fort Tanks. Like I said, I've never been a part of Fort Tanks before. I was looking forward to something different, something challenging. Never worked with a reservist. This whole I&I thing was different. So, being in 2nd Tanks for probably about 9 or 10 years, learning all that stuff over there in Lejeune and 2nd Marine Division and 2nd MEF was I pretty much had that down. So looking for something different, something challenging to do. And I was looking really forward to coming out here and working with 4th Tank Battalion and learning the reserve side. And of course, COVID-19 hit. And then right after that, the divestment came out. So fortunately, I wasn't able to do anything with 4 Tanks out here except for, the divestment actions and trying to get the active duty and the reserve Marines the best options they can to, either continue their careers or continue their lives in some form or fashion without too much disruption. So, talking to a lot of people, the rumors were going around when I was still at 2nd Tanks, particularly when we were out there conducting the NWX during October to November. In the back of my mind, I always thought, something's going to happen. Most likely some kind of, we'll take a hit, losing a battalion, losing companies, losing platoons, something. I always thought that, maybe the active duty side would go away, but maybe would keep the reserves. And, some aspect. I always try to keep that faith that, something would remain. Fortunately, nothing did. So, it's kind of heartbreaking. Spending 23 years in the Marine Corps, especially as a tanker, nothing but a tanker, to find out pretty much, this is it. I expected to do, 7 more years somewhere in the Marine Corps and hopefully within the tank community. But, that just like everybody else, particularly those young staff NCOs who were halfway through their careers, 10 to 12 years, they were pretty hit hard, probably harder than most of us since they're in the middle of their careers and they're trying to figure out what's next. What are they going to do? Lat move. And, some of the options are very limited for most of them. So just trying to figure out how to help them and how to help everybody else trying to figure out their next move, either in the Marine Corps or, IST, the Army, or in the civilian sector, trying to get out and continue their lives.
No, I appreciate that heartfelt answer, and talking about the staff NCOs, and then we'll kind of talk about as a whole 4th Tank Battalion. How are the Marines and 4th Tanks, both, all the Marines doing in light of this? Or, obviously, from your seat, it's probably a very challenging task and one to kind of manage, because you have to manage the active duty side in conjunction with the reserve side, and those are two different problem sets. with two different options and two different futures. And really, it's probably, in my opinion, harder for the reservists because there's not that many options geographically based on where some of these units are. So how are those Marines holding up, and what all are you kind of doing for those guys and gals?
Well, the younger Marines have a lot more options than obviously the staff NCOs and the senior staff NCOs. So just like you said, on a reserve side, their options are pretty limited. It's all due to the location. You know, what lat move options are available to that particular site in that particular state. What's close, what other reserve stations are close to them, what's open for their options of lat move. The only other option obviously is to either drop to IR also, or particularly for one of our sites up in Boise, we were able to push through a lot of ISTs since they pretty much shared, you know, building and their site. They have the Army National Guard tanks right across the street. So those guys, we were able to get a lot of them transferred over to the Army. So at least they were able to continue being tankers, but you know, they're on the Army side, but at least they're tankers. So, but a lot of the other guys are unfortunate. They're not able to continue in that aspect unless they want to go to active duty or National Guard around their locations. But most of them are lat moving, IUT into a different site, ride out their time, do whatever they can for the reserves to continue to do what they got to do geographically to their home station. For the active duty side, you know, we got a limited staff of active duty out here. Now we have all staff sergeants and above. They all got promoted, so trying to find the best solutions for them. Most of them got orders to something different to get them to the Terra or get them to 20 years to retire, or to help them out to try to be competitive for selection of first sergeant for the gunnies. So just trying to do the best I can, the best we can out here to get these Marines better options, or so they can take care of themselves and their families.
Well, knowing you and knowing who you are and the level of professionalism you bring, I'm sure you're doing everything you can, and I'm sure the Marines appreciate that very much. What message do you have to the audience and to those junior Marines, not just the 4 tanks, but kind of across the whole spectrum here?
Pretty much be patient. Unfortunately, when a divestment and all that stuff came out, so did COVID-19. So that left us in the dark for, you know, 30, 60, 90 days. We didn't know what was going on just because the whole country was shut down. A lot of information flow kind of stopped. So just trying to be patient to try to figure out the next step, which is best for them and their families. Definitely sit down, take a good hard look at yourselves, try to figure out what the best option is. You know, if it's staying in Marine, it's, you know, that's good. What job is out there for you? If it's transferring to the Army or any of the other services, you know, that might be the perfect option for some of them. Or unfortunately, you know, it's the best option for some of these guys is to get out and continue their civilian career in some form or fashion. But just definitely you got to sit down and think about it, make a decision and go. Sitting here being confused with the lack of information or misinformation or any of that going around is just not good for anybody. So just trying to just make the best decision for you and your family.
No, that's great advice, and ones that, you know, hopefully they'll listen to, because they, you know, I think it's important to know that folks like yourself, myself from my limited seat here, you know, we certainly are there to help and assist in any way we can, and we're all going through this. You know, every interview up to this point, you know, we've kind of talked about the fact that the divestment is really, you know, like losing a loved one. Because, you know, for 23 years in your life, shorter than that in mine, Tanks has been our life, and it has now come to an end. And it's a slow end because we'll be over the next few years. But yeah, it's certainly not easy on anybody. I certainly thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Obviously, you're still at work, and I grabbed you during a work day, so hopefully your boss doesn't get angry. But by all means, I do appreciate you taking the time, and your messages are certainly ones that these junior Marines and the community need to hear. So with that, what parting comments do you have?
Nothing much, honestly. Gotta get back to work.
Roger. All right, Master Guns, I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Right.